It was the kind of night that made the world hold its breath, the snow falling silently over the Colorado mountains, thick and heavy, like nature's way of reminding people just how small they really were. The wind whispering through tall pines, rattling the window panes of cabins that lined the forested slopes, each light inside flickering like a fragile secret against the vast frozen dark. Inside one of the largest properties perched halfway up the mountain, the fire in the hearth crackled low, the house modern but built of stone and glass, giving it the look of something ancient and unshakable. Its owner, Liam Carter, sitting alone on a leather armchair near the fire, a tumbler of untouched scotch resting on the table beside him, the silence around him deliberate, something he had spent years perfecting. Until someone knocked on his door, not loudly, not urgently, but with a quiet rhythm that felt almost unreal. At first he ignored it, thinking it was probably the wind, but then it came again, 3 faint knocks, not demanding, not desperate, just there. As Liam frowned, stood, and walked across the wide living room, his steps silent against the hardwood floor, and as he reached the door he paused for a moment, something unspoken settling in the air, before he pulled it open. And there she was, standing on the porch, a young woman soaked to the bone, her clothes barely more than scraps against the winter cold, a torn hoodie, thin leggings that clung to her legs like second skin, and no shoes, her bare feet red and raw from the snow, her lips trembling as she looked up at him with wide, unflinching eyes. Her voice cracked as she spoke, soft, broken, almost apologetic. "May I sleep on your porch?" Liam stared at her, stunned, her face pale, but her eyes alive, filled with fear and defiance and something deeper. Not begging, not manipulating, just asking, simply and clearly, like someone who had run out of places to go. Snow clung to her lashes, her hair damp and tangled, a faded auburn made darker by the wet, one hand gripping a small duffel bag, the other pulling the shredded hoodie tighter around her chest, as if modesty still mattered when your body was turning blue. He couldn't speak, couldn't move, because around her neck, glinting under the porch light, was something that made his breath catch. A silver pendant, shaped like a crescent moon, with a single scratch down the center, a design he hadn't seen in over 10 years, because he made it once for his little sister, the only one he ever made by hand, and she had died in a snowstorm just like this. Liam blinked, the cold hitting him then as he stood motionless, the warmth of the house behind him meeting the icy air spilling in from the door, but still he said nothing. The girl didn't flinch, she just stood there, shivering harder now, her eyes slowly dimming, not from fear but from exhaustion, and then she took a step back, her voice smaller this time. "It's okay, I'll go, I just thought, maybe." Liam moved forward without thinking, not to grab her, just to hold the door open wider, his voice low, rusty from hours of silence. "Come inside." The girl blinked in disbelief, then stepped past him, her knees trembling, barely holding her upright, and as she entered, he saw the tiny blood-speckled prints her feet left behind on the polished wood floor. She didn't say thank you, and he didn't expect her to, because somehow, in that moment, in the quiet of that snow-covered night, they both understood something neither of them could name. Something unspoken had just passed between them, and nothing was ever going to be the same again. Liam Carter was 35, a name that once lit up the front pages of every tech magazine in America, a self-made millionaire before he turned 30, the kind of man who made his first fortune from an app that simplified supply chains, and his second from selling it just before the market collapsed. But none of that mattered anymore. Not since the night his world fell apart. Not since the moment the only person who truly knew him was taken by a storm, just like the one outside tonight. After his sister's death, he disappeared from the public eye, sold most of his holdings, and retreated to the mountains, where the silence was thick enough to bury memories, and the air too cold for the past to follow. His house, built from stone and steel, sat halfway up a ridge in a remote part of Colorado, designed with open glass walls and high ceilings, the kind of place that looked like it should host parties, laughter, and music, but inside it was always quiet, always too neat, too untouched, as if even the dust didn't dare settle. He didn't hire staff, didn't take visitors, didn't speak to the neighbors, not that there were many. Only the occasional delivery or maintenance man came up that winding road, and even they were met with short nods and silence. Liam filled his days with routine, mornings in the home gym, afternoons reading or sketching new architectural ideas he never planned to build, nights staring into the fire with a drink that always remained half full. He wasn't broken in the loud way people imagine. He wasn't dramatic or visibly grieving. He was simply empty, like a house with the lights on but no one home. The room he had placed the girl in used to be his sister's guest room, a warm space with soft lighting and a single bed by the window that overlooked the valley, untouched for years, sealed like a memory he couldn't bear to reopen. Until tonight. He had wrapped her in a fleece blanket, left a space heater by the bed, and placed a thermos of hot water nearby without saying much, only watching her with guarded curiosity and maybe something more. Something he wasn't ready to name. Her bag was worn, the zippers rusted, and the way she held it close, even in sleep, told him everything he needed to know. This girl had been on the run for a while, and whatever she was running from had taught her not to trust safety when it arrived. As he stood at the edge of the hallway, watching the slow rise and fall of her breathing, he noticed how even in sleep her hands remained clenched, how her brow furrowed as if the dreams she carried weren't kind. He wasn't sure why he hadn't called the police, hadn't asked for an explanation, hadn't turned her away. Maybe it was the pendant, maybe it was the snow, maybe it was the way she had looked at him like he was the last door left in a world that had already shut her out 1,000. In the morning, the storm had eased but not stopped. Gray light poured through the windows, and Liam found her awake, sitting on the edge of the bed with the blanket wrapped tightly around her, her eyes scanning the room like a bird unsure if the cage was golden or not. She didn't speak first, but when he offered her a mug of tea, she took it with both hands and nodded. Not quite a thank you, but something that meant she understood the gesture. He asked for her name, and after a pause, she said, "Ellie," her voice still rough from the cold, and when he asked if she had any family, she just shook her head once, then looked away. She was 25, he guessed, though her eyes looked older, like someone who had counted winters instead of birthdays. And though she was clearly exhausted, she held herself with a kind of quiet strength, the kind that came from surviving things no one should have to endure. Liam didn't press her. He knew better than to demand answers from someone still deciding whether you were safety or threat, so instead, he told her she could stay until the storm passed, a few days at most. Nothing permanent, just shelter, just warmth. But deep down, he already knew it wasn't going to be that simple, because when she had looked up at him from that porch, soaked and shivering, wearing a pendant he hadn't seen since his sister died, something had cracked, something had shifted, and now, with her in the house, in the very room where laughter once lived, the silence felt different, like it wasn't his anymore, like the house itself had been waiting for someone to return. The first 2 days passed like a slow drip of winter sunlight through frosted glass. Ellie moved through the house quietly, never going into rooms she hadn't been invited to, never touching anything she didn't absolutely need. She ate little, slept even less, and Liam noticed how she always stayed close to the window, as if afraid the snow might erase the path she came from. Or worse, trap her in a place that wasn't hers. She never asked for more than she was given. But she also never looked entirely comfortable. She was grateful, yes, but not relaxed, as if kindness always came with fine print she hadn't read yet. Liam, for his part, kept his distance. He wasn't used to sharing his space, his time, or his attention, and certainly not with someone who made the air in his home feel warmer without even trying. He watched her one afternoon as she sat curled in a blanket on the floor near the fire, a book open in her lap, though she wasn't reading, just staring into the flames like they were telling her something only she could hear, her eyes glassy but dry, her posture alert, even in stillness. He wanted to ask what she was thinking, what she was hiding, why she looked like someone who'd been running from more than just the cold. But he said nothing. Instead, he walked into the kitchen and returned with a small bowl of stew, the only thing he could cook well, and placed it in front of her without a word. She looked at it, then at him, then back at the bowl, and finally spoke softly. "You don't have to keep feeding me. You've already done enough." Liam met her gaze and answered without hesitation. "It's just food, Ellie. You don't have to earn it." That night, the generator flickered from the weight of the storm, plunging the house into darkness for a full 10 seconds, and in that instant, Liam heard a sharp inhale from the living room, followed by the sound of movement. He reached for a flashlight, found her crouched low behind the couch, arms wrapped around herself, her breathing rapid and shallow. When he turned the light on, she didn't look up. She only whispered, "I thought it was happening again." He knelt beside her, his voice quiet, and she shook her head, her voice cracking. "I was sleeping in this warehouse once, with a few other girls. It was supposed to be just a place to hide for a night, but then someone broke in. I don't even know what he wanted, but he smashed the power box and it all went dark, and after that, I couldn't find the exit, couldn't breathe. I never stayed in one place long again." Liam didn't speak, didn't offer empty reassurances. Instead, he sat with her in the dim light, not touching, not moving, just present. And after a long while, she looked at him, eyes red but steady, and said, "Thank you. Not for the soup, not for the blanket, but for not asking me to explain myself when I wasn't ready." That moment stayed with him, not because it was dramatic, but because it wasn't. Because in a life filled with transactions and noise, it was rare to share silence that meant something. The days blurred, snow turned to sleet, then back to snow, and gradually Ellie started to shift. Not by much, not quickly, but Liam began to notice it in the way she moved through the house. No longer hugging the walls or avoiding eye contact, she started helping him with little things, folding laundry, wiping down counters. She even asked to take out the trash, not because she had to, but because it made her feel useful. One afternoon, he found her in the studio, a room he rarely entered anymore, sketching on a pad he'd forgotten was there, the lines rough but intentional, the beginnings of a cabin, small and tucked between trees, familiar in a way he couldn't quite place. "You draw?" he asked, and she looked up, startled, then nodded slowly. "Used to, back when I thought I'd actually finished school, before everything went sideways." He stepped closer, glancing at the paper. "This looks a lot like the first cabin I ever stayed in, near Aspen. How do you know what it looked like?" Ellie blinked. "I don't. I just draw what comes into my head. But maybe I saw a photo once, or maybe it's coincidence." Liam wasn't sure if he believed in coincidence anymore. That night, as they sat by the fireplace, the power restored, the room quiet except for the hum of heat and the crackle of flame, Liam found himself watching her instead of the fire, noticing how the light danced in her eyes, how she leaned her head slightly when she was deep in thought. He asked her, "Why did you come here, really?" And for the first time, she didn't deflect. "I was just trying to get to the next place," she said. "I didn't even know where I was going. I just kept walking until my legs gave out, and then I saw the porch light, and I thought, maybe just tonight, maybe someone won't slam the door in my face." He nodded slowly, and when he spoke, his voice was lower, almost unsure. "That pendant you wear, where did you get it?" Ellie touched the chain instinctively, her fingers brushing the cool silver. "An old woman at a shelter in Texas gave it to me when I was 10. She said it belonged to a girl who used to stay there, a girl who was quiet and kind and loved the snow. Said she reminded her of me, and that I should have something beautiful to hold on to." Liam's hands tightened slightly, his mind racing with memories, because he remembered the necklace. He remembered giving it to his sister on her last birthday, and he remembered the way she always said snow made her feel safe, like everything bad was buried under a blanket of white. He didn't say any of that to Ellie, not yet. not while she was still learning how to breathe without flinching. But inside him, something had cracked further, not painfully, not like breaking, but like thawing, like the kind of shift that happens when a frozen stream finally starts to flow again. She doesn't want to be saved, he thought. She just wants to stop drowning. And for the first time in years, he wanted to be the shore someone could swim to. The snow finally eased on the 7th day, leaving behind a landscape blanketed in white so thick it muted every sound. The world outside the house seemed untouched, like a painting waiting for someone to step into it. But inside, something had already shifted. The silence that once felt like stone now felt softer, warmer, alive in a way Liam hadn't felt in years. Ellie moved differently now. Not quite like she belonged, but like she no longer feared she would be forced to leave. She still didn't speak much, but when she did, her words carried a weight that made even silence seem lighter. One morning, as Liam fixed coffee in the kitchen, he noticed her standing in the foyer, her eyes fixed on a small framed photo, half hidden on a side table. It was a picture of a girl, laughing, eyes shut, hair tangled in wind, standing in the snow. Liam's sister, the only person he had ever let truly see him. Ellie didn't ask who the girl was, didn't point, didn't pretend curiosity. She simply said, "She looks like she belonged in the snow," and Liam, for the first time, replied without tightening, "She did." She said it made her feel safe, like everything sad was being held under the surface. There was a pause, not awkward, just full, and then Ellie whispered, "I think that's how I feel too, like the snow hides things, but also forgives them." Liam didn't know what to say to that, so he poured the coffee, handed her a mug, and they stood there, side by side, not needing to fill the space between them with anything more. Later that afternoon, Liam found himself in his study, scrolling through old emails he had saved from his sister. One stood out, a short note from years ago that read, "Met a girl at the shelter who reminds me of me. Same eyes, same silence. Her name's Ellie. She drew me something, said she wants to be an architect. I gave her that old pendant you made, figured it should go somewhere it'll mean something." His breath caught in his throat as he reread the words, his hands frozen above the keyboard, because it wasn't coincidence. It wasn't just a shared silence. Ellie had known his sister, even if only briefly, even if she didn't remember the name behind the kindness. That night, he asked her directly, "You ever been to Dallas, maybe around 10 years ago?" Ellie thought for a moment, then nodded. "I was placed in a foster program, there for a few months. Didn't stay long. I was difficult." Liam managed a faint smile. "My sister volunteered at a shelter there. She wrote me about a girl named Ellie, said she saw herself in her." Ellie went quiet, eyes searching. Then she whispered, "I remember a girl. She gave me hot chocolate and crayons, told me to draw a place I felt safe. I drew a cabin, snow all around. She said it looked like home." Liam closed his eyes, the memory sharp and soft all at once. It was her. It had to be. And he said, "She gave you that pendant, didn't she?" Ellie looked down at the silver chain, her voice trembling. "I never knew her name, but yeah, she gave it to me, told me to keep it until I found a place that felt like I deserved to stay." Liam didn't say anything after that. He couldn't. The emotion too raw, too near. He only nodded and left the room, stepping outside into the cold night, letting the wind bite his skin like penance. Over the next few days, Ellie began to open more, not all at once, but in pieces, like puzzle fragments she'd hidden from even herself. She told him about her childhood, the bouncing from home to home, how she learned to survive by disappearing into the background, how every time she trusted someone, they left or turned cruel, how the baby she once carried had been her reason to try, but after losing him, everything inside her broke in quiet ways no one could see from the outside. She said she started walking because moving felt better than remembering, because if she stayed still, the pain caught up too fast, and because she wanted to believe there was still a place in the world that didn't look at her like she was broken glass. Liam listened, not as a man trying to fix something, but as someone who had also walked through fire and learned how to sit in the smoke. He didn't interrupt, didn't console, he simply stayed present, and in return Ellie began to trust him. Not fully, not easily, but enough to stop looking for the exit every time he raised his voice to call her name. They spent hours in quiet rooms, sometimes working, sometimes just being, and Liam found himself sketching again, letting her peek at his notebooks, showing her designs he once dreamed of building, and Ellie in return showed him her own drawings, rough, unfinished, but full of soul and imagination. One evening, as snow began to fall again in soft flakes, Ellie brought him a sketch of a porch, simple and wide, wrapped around a cabin with ivy creeping up one side. 2 chairs sat on the edge, one slightly turned toward the other, and beneath it, in small cursive, she had written, "Where someone said yes." He looked at her, confused, and she smiled gently. "I've never had anyone open a door to me before, not really, but you did, and I think I stopped running the moment I stepped inside." Liam swallowed hard, then reached for the sketch, fingers brushing hers, and for a moment, the world narrowed to that one fragile, perfect touch. She stayed longer after that, no longer asking how long she was allowed to, no longer apologizing for her presence, and he no longer counted the days like time owed him anything. The truth was out now, the connection real, not just in shared loss, but in the strange, quiet ways 2 lives can orbit each other for years without knowing, until finally colliding in a moment as small as a knock on a door in the middle of a storm. They didn't call it love, not yet, not with words, but in the way Liam began waking before the alarm just to make coffee the way she liked it, in the way Ellie began humming softly as she folded laundry, in the way they both paused to watch snowflakes gather on the glass. It was there, slowly growing, rooted in something deeper than romance, something that looked a lot like healing. The storm returned 2 weeks later, not with the same weight of the first one, but with a kind of relentlessness that turned roads to ice and sky to slate. It came without warning, blanketing the town below and isolating the ridge for days. The isolation didn't bother Liam anymore, not like it used to, not since Ellie's presence had begun to stretch into the corners of his world like light sneaking under a closed door. Her laughter had become part of the air, soft and rare but unmistakable. Her footsteps something he found himself listening for even when he pretended not to care, and though neither of them had said anything out loud, the rhythm between them had become almost instinctive, 2 people moving through space as if they'd always been meant to fit in the same silence. It was during one of those quiet afternoons, while Ellie sat sketching by the window and Liam worked on his laptop, that a message pinged his phone, a news alert from a tabloid site he usually ignored, but the headline made his stomach drop. "Tech recluse shelters runaway girl. Is Liam Carter's snowbound love story a cover-up?" The article was full of speculation, blurry zoomed-in photos taken from a drone, a mention of a mysterious redhead seen entering his property, quotes from anonymous sources hinting at scandal. None of it was true, not the tone, not the assumptions, but truth didn't matter when gossip had already taken root, and Liam knew how fast lies moved in a world starved for controversy. Ellie noticed the change in his expression before he said anything. "What's wrong?" she asked. But his silence said more than words could. He handed her the phone, watched her eyes move across the screen, slow at first, then faster, her fingers tightening around the device, her face paling in a way that made him want to reach out but didn't know how. "I didn't tell anyone where I was," she whispered. "I haven't spoken to anyone, I swear." "I know," Liam said. "I believe you. This isn't your fault." But Ellie wasn't listening anymore. Her mind was already spiraling, her past pressing in again like cold air beneath the door. "I can't stay here," she said, voice brittle. "I knew this wouldn't last. I'm not supposed to be in places like this." Liam stood quickly. "You're not going anywhere. This is your home now." But she stepped back, shaking her head. "No, it's not. This is..." A pause, a warm one, maybe the kindest I've ever known. "But it's not mine." I don't belong in stories with men like you. I don't belong in houses that look like dreams. And I don't want to watch this turn into something ugly. I can't survive another fall from something that felt safe. He moved to block the door, not forcefully, just there, present. Ellie, you're not just someone I took in. You're not a guest anymore. You're the reason this place stopped feeling like a tomb. But she was already grabbing her bag, packing faster than she could think, her movements sharp, mechanical, and Liam felt panic rise in his chest, not the loud kind, but the quiet, desperate kind that reminded him too much of the night his sister vanished. "Don't do this," he said, his voice cracking for the first time. "I lost her. I can't lose you, too." Ellie froze, her back still turned, then whispered, "I'm not her, Liam. I know you see her when you look at me. And maybe that's why you opened the door. But I can't be the ghost of someone you already loved." The door closed behind her before he could say more, her figure vanishing into the snow, and for a moment he didn't move, didn't chase, just stood there, swallowed by the same silence he had once lived in, but this time it wasn't protective, it was hollow, cruel, suffocating in a way that made him drop to his knees without realizing it. When he finally rose, it was almost dark and the snow had begun to fall heavier, wind slicing through the trees. But he didn't care. He grabbed his coat, his boots, and ran, not thinking, not planning, only moving, only following the prints she'd left behind, like a trail of memory. The slope was slick, ice beneath powder, and halfway down his foot slipped, sending him crashing into a bank of frozen ground. Pain shot through his leg, sharp and immediate, and he couldn't stand, couldn't move, the cold biting faster now that he was still, breath forming clouds in the air that already felt too thin. He called out, not loudly, but enough, once, then twice. "Ellie." Somewhere in the trees a shape moved, slow at first, then quicker, and then she was there, dropping beside him, her hair plastered with snow, her eyes wild with fear. "What happened? I came to find you," he rasped. "But I guess you found me instead." She checked his leg. It wasn't broken, just twisted. Painful, but not deadly. "We have to get you back," she said, teeth chattering as the wind picked up. No time for anger now, only survival. She helped him up, shouldering most of his weight, guiding him slowly back toward the house, every step difficult but necessary, and by the time they reached the porch, both of them were shaking. Inside, she helped him to the couch, wrapped his leg in ice, covered him in blankets, then collapsed beside him on the floor, both of them too exhausted to speak. After a long silence, he whispered, "I don't see my sister when I look at you, not anymore. I see the girl who knocked on my door in the middle of a storm and asked to sleep on the porch, the girl who taught me that kindness doesn't have to come with distance, and love doesn't need to be earned through pain." Ellie's voice was barely audible. "I was so afraid, not of you, but of losing the only place I've ever felt seen, the only person who looked at me and didn't see pity or charity, just me." Liam reached out, fingers brushing hers. "You didn't ruin anything. The world did that. But you, Ellie, you gave me something back I thought was gone forever." She looked up then, eyes glistening, and for the first time since they met, she didn't flinch when he leaned closer, his forehead resting lightly against hers. Not a kiss, not yet, just presence, just promise, and outside the wind howled, but inside something stayed still, something stayed warm. It wasn't a perfect moment, but it was real, and for two people who had been broken open by life, sometimes real was the most perfect thing of all. In the days that followed, the snow softened again, not just outside, but in the spaces between them. Ellie no longer avoided his gaze when she walked into the room. Liam no longer pretended to stay busy just to keep from watching her. Something had changed between them during that night of near loss and cold breath. Something deeper than comfort, something older than timing, a kind of knowing that didn't need to be explained with big words or labels. And though neither had said the word love, it hovered in every quiet glance, every unspoken gesture, every moment they chose to stay when running had always been the easier answer. But peace was fragile, and it shattered quickly, not by the world outside, but by the weight of what still hadn't been said, what still lingered like a shadow between them. One morning, while Liam sat by the fireplace, sketching a renovation plan for the porch, Ellie placed a small folded note on the table beside him, then sat across from him in silence, her hands twisting in her lap, her face unreadable. "I need to tell you something," she began, and though her voice was steady, her eyes betrayed a storm. "You think I ended up here by accident, but the truth is, I came here on purpose. I knew your name, Liam. I knew who you were." He didn't speak, only watched her, brows slightly furrowed, his pencil still in his hand but unmoving. "I didn't plan to come to your house, not exactly, but when I was in town, I heard someone mention the recluse on the ridge, the one who used to build empires but now lived alone, and I wondered what kind of man chooses to disappear like that. So I looked you up. I found the stories, the photos of your sister, and when I saw her face, I knew. She was the girl who gave me that pendant, the girl who held my hand when I thought I'd never be safe again. And for the first time in years, I wanted to say thank you, even if it meant just standing outside your house for one night." Liam inhaled slowly, the words hitting like snow against bare skin, not painful but cold enough to sting. "So you didn't knock by chance, you came here because of her." Ellie nodded. "I thought maybe if I could see where she lived, maybe if I could feel what she felt, I could remember how it felt to matter, even for a minute. But then the storm came, and everything spiraled, and I didn't mean to stay. I didn't mean to fall into your life. I swear I wasn't trying to manipulate you. I just wanted warmth, just one night of not being invisible." Liam stood, walked to the window, stared out at the trees bending under the soft weight of new snow. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. "When I opened that door and saw you standing there, I felt like I was looking at something I lost and never thought I'd see again. And yes, at first it was because of her, because of the pendant, because of your eyes. But Ellie, somewhere along the way it stopped being about her. It became about you." She rose, walked toward him slowly, each step careful. "I needed you to know the truth before this turned into something bigger. I couldn't build anything real on a lie, even one that started from pain. I know what people think when they hear my story. They think I'm damaged, or worse, they think I'm dangerous. And if you think that too, I'll go, no questions asked." He turned to face her, and for a long moment they said nothing, only looked, really looked, and then he reached out, touched her face with the back of his hand. "You don't scare me, Ellie. You never did." She leaned into his touch, eyes closing for a breath. "I've never had anyone believe me without needing me to bleed for it first." And Liam, with a voice that shook more than he wanted, replied, "I don't need your pain. I just need your presence." They stayed like that, forehead to forehead, breathing the same cold air, letting the truth hang between them, not like a threat, but like a thread, something that might fray but wouldn't snap. The next morning, headlines exploded. Someone from town had leaked the story, photos of Ellie taken without her knowing, rumors, half-truths, twisted narratives, all painting her as a con artist who lured a broken millionaire into a scandal. Messages poured in, reporters camped outside the bottom of the ridge, helicopters circled, and Ellie stopped speaking again. Shut down in a way that made Liam's chest ache, not from betrayal, but from helplessness. He tried to shield her, tried to use lawyers, connections, silence, but the world didn't care about silence. It demanded explanations, demanded confessions, demanded blood. One night, after finding her curled in the studio, staring at her sketchbook but not drawing, Liam sat beside her. "You don't owe anyone anything, not me, not them, not the ghosts of your past." Ellie looked up, voice barely a whisper. "I'm tired of being a story told by people who never asked for the truth." He nodded, then reached for his phone, made a call he had promised never to make again, And the next evening he went live on national television. No lights, no PR, no script, just him, sitting in front of a camera, telling the world about a girl who knocked on his door in the middle of a storm and reminded him how to feel. "She didn't steal anything from me," he said. "She gave me everything I didn't know I was missing. She didn't ask to be saved, she just asked to sleep on the porch, and in doing so she saved me." He told them about his sister, about the pendant, about the truth that didn't fit into headlines, and when he finished he looked into the lens and said, "I don't care what the world believes, because I know what I saw in her eyes. I saw life. I saw strength. I saw the beginning of something real." The backlash came, of course, but so did the messages. Thousands from people who had been invisible too. Women who had run, men who had lost, children who had grown up in places where love was rationed, like heat in winter, and Ellie, watching from the couch, tears on her cheeks, finally whispered, "I didn't think anyone would ever stand up for me like that." Liam pulled her close. "You didn't need me to, but I wanted to, because you stood for me the moment you didn't walk away." They didn't become perfect after that. The world didn't suddenly turn kind. But the storm passed, the headlines faded, and what remained wasn't noise. It was something solid, something earned, something called home. In the quiet days that followed, Liam sketched a new design, a cabin with a wide porch, not at the top of a ridge but closer to the town, somewhere people could reach, and Ellie added her own lines, her own dreams, her own corners for those who never had a place to go. They built it together, not just with wood and stone, but with mornings that started with shared coffee and evenings that ended with quiet laughter. And though they never marked the exact day it became love, they knew it by the way they stayed, by the way they chose, again and again, to be each other's place to return to when the wind howled too loud. They didn't save each other, not in the way fairy tales tell it, but they found in each other a reason to keep standing. And sometimes that was more than enough. Spring arrived in quiet layers, the snow no longer a blanket but a memory, the air still crisp in the mornings but softer by noon. The ridge looked different now, not because the trees had changed, but because something inside the house had shifted, and with it, everything surrounding it seemed to breathe again. Ellie stood on the porch one morning, a cup of tea warming her hands, her eyes following the outline of the town below, her sketch pad resting on the wooden railing, open to a design that had evolved over weeks, a community space for women like her, people who had been forgotten, people who had knocked on doors and been turned away, except this door would always be open. Liam stepped beside her, his arm brushing hers, no words exchanged, just presence, and together they watched the sunrise stretch across the valley like hope reaching into every shadow. The cabin they lived in was still the same stone and glass structure, still quiet, still surrounded by trees, but inside, the silence no longer felt empty. It felt full, full of shared breakfasts, late-night conversations, sketches spread across tables, and laughter that came slowly but stayed long. They didn't talk much about the past anymore, not because it didn't matter, but because it no longer controlled the rhythm of their days. It had become part of the foundation, a quiet truth beneath everything they had built together. One afternoon, as Ellie organized her portfolio near the fireplace, she found the original sketch she had made in the studio, the one with the porch and the two chairs. She held it for a moment, then handed it to Liam, her eyes searching his. "Do you remember this?" she asked, and he nodded. "Of course I do. You wrote something under it, something about where someone said yes." She smiled softly. "I didn't realize back then how much I wanted someone to say yes to me, not to take me in, not to fix me, just to see me and still stay." Liam looked at her, his voice steady. "I didn't say yes to a story or a tragedy. I said yes to a person. And I'd say it again, every single day." Later that week, they visited the town courthouse. Nothing grand, no photographers, no drama, just a small signature, a quiet promise, and a new beginning. Their last names didn't change, there were no rings exchanged under chandeliers, but they walked out hand in hand, and the world outside somehow looked softer than before. That evening they returned home, and Liam took Ellie to the very porch where she had once stood in the snow, where her voice had trembled not from the cold but from the weight of asking for a chance. He held her hands, the sky glowing orange and gold behind them, and whispered, "I never built this porch for guests. I built it to look out into the world and wonder if anyone would ever walk toward me again. And the night you knocked, I thought it was just coincidence, but now it was the universe giving me one more chance to open the right door." She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just nodded once and leaned into him, and they stayed like that for a long time, not as two broken people who had found shelter in each other, but as two whole hearts that had finally come home. Not by fate, not by force, but by choice. Sometimes the most extraordinary love stories don't begin with a kiss or a perfect date or even a grand moment. Sometimes they begin with a question whispered through the cold, a knock at the door, and the quiet courage it takes to say, "May I sleep on your porch?" Because in that one question, a new life began. One built not from perfection, but from presence, from belief, from love that asks for nothing but the chance to stay.